Do you know anyone who's struggling to put food on the table? I'm betting you do. More than 50% of Filipino families reported experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity last year. That's according to a nutrition assessment survey of the Department of Science and Technology's Food and Nutrition Research Institute. This pandemic highlighted the issue of food security, as well as the need to improve our food system in order to make food more accessible to families, communities, and individuals. But how do we create and maintain resilience in our food system? In what ways is agriculture stepping up to meet evolving demands? And where does technology fit in the equation? Good morning. I'm Patricia Mirasol, and I'm a multimedia reporter for Business World. Today, we have the honor of conversing with four experts as they tackle the issue of sustainability and ensuring resilience in our food system. Our first speaker is Mr. Romeo S. Reside. Mr. Reside engages with the Philippine government, the University of the Philippines system, research agencies, and civil society organizations to raise IRRI's profile in the country and partner with them in research for development on rice-based food systems. Prior to IRRI, Mr. Reside served as Assistant Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. He also worked at the Philippine Statistics Authority. His past positions involved working with statistical systems in agricultural policy and planning, forging partnerships with a variety of sectors, and forming a strong local and international network. Mr. Reside, would you like to share your opening statement?
Thank you. Good morning, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, mga kaibigan natin sa Business World na naghirap ng mag-organize ng workshop na ito. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak at this important forum on ensuring resiliency of our food systems. For my part, let me get to the point immediately and let me talk of something that is close to my heart, rice research as it contributes to resiliency in our food systems. You know, when it comes to food security, particularly in the Philippines, rice remains an important part of the conversation. And as you know, expenditure for food in Filipino households comprise about 40% of the household expenses, and around 1/4 of that food budget goes to rice. And Filipinos consume around, you can guess, 118 kilograms of rice per person per year. That's more than 2 sacks per year. Rice, along with other cereals like corn and wheat, are daily staples for the vast majority of the global population. And therefore, they are an integral part of the nutrition, cultures, and economies of many low and middle income countries. As such, now and in the foreseeable future, enhancing the productivity, resilience, and sustainability of these crops, particularly rice, in the Philippines, is key to food security. The International Rice Research Institute, or IRI, is an international agricultural research and training organization with headquarters, as you know, in Los Baños, Laguna, and has offices in 17 countries. It is dedicated to abolishing poverty and hunger among people and population that depend on rice-based agri-food systems. Well, in the Philippines, IRI has been supporting the Philippine Department of Agriculture and its various agencies to boost the productivity, resilience, and sustainability of the rice-based food systems in the country. And just very quickly, over the last 6 decades, this partnership has produced many achievements, including better yields per hectare for rice, higher tolerance to biotic and abiotic stresses, increased water and input efficiency, and new technologies, this is important, for enhanced production, harvest, and post-harvest practices. And these accomplishments are well known and they are well documented, and you're welcome to study them. But let me cite a prime achievement of this collaboration between the Department of Agriculture, the Philippine Rice Research Institute, or PhilRice, and IRI. And this is the recent food regulatory approval of golden rice in the Philippines. First, that it is safe to eat, and second, that it can now be mass produced. And this happened through the partners working together and leveraging each other's strengths in research. Filipino farmers can now be the first in the world to grow this beta-carotene fortified rice, which has the potential to significantly reduce the incidence of childhood blindness among malnourished children. But despite all that, there is still much more that needs to be done. Increasing and intensifying climate change impacts, competition in the use of natural resources for production, and the growing populations are straining our food system's ability to deliver available, accessible, and affordable food. And the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns that we are in right now have also exposed the fragility of our food systems, either local, regional, or global. So resilience needs to be built into our value chains, from seeds and cultivation to harvesting and transport from farm to markets. But there is reason to hope. You know, advances in various fields show promise in delivering solutions to some of the challenges that we face. New genetic research continues to enhance research in nutrition, while a better understanding of the land water systems is helping us produce more with less and protect the environment at the same time. And again, as I said, this is interesting. Emerging technologies and big data are helping improve value chains, reduce inequities, and boost farmer incomes. And more urgent focus by government on the threat of climate change to agriculture is propelling new policies and investments. I'll end with this at this point, and I will welcome comments later on. Thank you very much, Pat. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Reside. I'm glad to hear that there is reason to hope. Let's talk more about those technologies later. Our
Yes.
second
Yeah.
speaker, yeah. Our second speaker is Ms. Tamara P. Duran, Assistant FAO Representative for Program of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. In her current role, Ms. Duran oversees the program development and management of FAO's portfolio in the country, which includes initiatives that seek to promote food security and nutrition, as well as increase the resilience of the sector and its stakeholders to both natural and human induced threats and emergencies. Prior to joining FAO, Ms. Duran had stints in the Department of Agriculture and the National Economic and Development Authority. Ms. Duran earned a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Economics from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and a Master in Development Economics from UP Diliman. Ms. Duran, would you like to share your opening statement?
Thank you very much, Pat. Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. So first of all, on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I would like to commend Business World for organizing once again this very timely forum on ensuring the resilience of our food systems, which, as you know, this actually comes at the heels of the historic Global Food System Summit that focused on the same key issue. It's definitely a privilege for FAO to take part in such conversations again and be given the opportunity to share our insights on this topic. So, as many of you may know, a food system is one that goes beyond farming or producing food. It
Mhm,
covers the journey of food from farm to table, which includes the
mhm,
entire chain of activities such as production, processing, transport, packaging, marketing, and distribution. Intrinsic to this chain are its socioeconomic and environmental outcomes. So the disruptions resulting from the COVID-19 crisis exposed many of the fragilities of food systems. These challenges includes accessing safe, nutritious food at affordable prices when movement was restricted and markets were scaled down, and the vulnerability of employees and other actors in the chain across the food system. Relatedly, we cannot discount the risks to the very survival of firms and industries, particularly micro, small, and medium sized enterprises from producers, manufacturers, traders, and food processors to transporters and retailers. So, in taking action to support the improved functionality of these systems during response and recovery, it is imperative to adopt a holistic approach to analyzing and addressing constraints, as well as the trade offs implicit in their resolution. So, the focus should be building back better while leaving no one behind. This calls for promoting innovations for increased efficiency, enhancing inclusiveness and resilience of food supply chains, and ensuring food safety and nutritional quality of diets. Also, reducing food loss and waste, sustaining and strengthening agri food enterprises, and fostering investment in the green recovery of food value chains. So, it's also imperative to highlight the promotion of domestic food production and shorter supply chains, as these are what we have learned. These are key to building more resilient and sustainable local food systems. So, as Agriculture Secretary William Dar highlighted during the UN Food Systems pre-summit, the government has been employing a whole-of-nation approach to attain food security, which is actually in sync with the 5 action tracks towards food systems transformation. He also emphasized that government has the resources to provide an enabling environment to improve food systems that not only focus on sustainable production of nutritious and affordable food, but at the same time create jobs and income opportunities for farmers and efficiently manage scarce natural resources, among others. It was also highlighted that um, science, technology, and innovation play very important roles in terms of accelerating transformation of the country's agri-food systems. We live in a moment when immediate steps need to be undertaken to ensure that the food systems that feed us today, tomorrow, and in the future are sustainable. These will contribute to the aspirations of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. FAO, which is the specialized technical agency of the United Nations that leads global efforts to defeat hunger, we recognize the importance of innovations for increased resilience of agri-food systems. Innovation in agriculture cuts across all dimensions of the production cycle along the entire value chain. So it covers crop, forestry, fishery, livestock production, up to the management of inputs and resources and market access. It may, for example, involve planting new crop varieties, combining traditional practices with new scientific knowledge, such as anticipatory actions, applying pest control or new pest control and post-harvest practices, or even engaging with with markets in new, more worthwhile ways. So innovation is not just about technology, which on its own may simply remain on the shelf. It is also and most importantly about social, economic, institutional, organizational, and policy processes and having an impact on the lives of family farmers. As an organization, we also acknowledge the importance of strengthening partnerships to foster the national institutional innovations required to support sustainable food system development. And together, we can help the most vulnerable prevent further crisis, increase resilience to shocks, and accelerate the rebuilding and sustainable transformation of our food systems. So I will stop here for now, and I'd like to wish everyone a very productive and engaging forum ahead. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you, Ms. Duran. I do agree that COVID 19 highlighted the fragilities of the system, and I do hope that we all build back better whilst leaving no one behind. Our third speaker is Ms. Charina A. Javier, a science research specialist too of the Nutrition Assessment and Monitoring Division of the DOST's Food and Nutrition Research Institute. With her prior to her current designation, she worked under the Food and Nutrition Creative and Publication Unit of FNRI's Technology Diffusion in Science and Technology Services Division. Ms. Javier graduated from the University of the Philippines with a bachelor's degree of science in community nutrition and a master's in development economics. Ms. Javier, would you like to share your opening statement? Fourth speaker first. Our fourth speaker is Ms. Ain G. Torres, a policy specialist and researcher of World Agroforestry Philippines. Ms. Torres' technical and project coordination work currently focuses on sustainability, food security, and economic and governance issues in the agriculture and natural resources sectors of the Philippines. Prior to joining ICRAF, Ms. Torres worked as an economist and policy researcher at the Ateneo School of Government, where she worked on governance reform studies, including agriculture and private sector led development initiatives in the country. Ms. Torres completed her Master of Science in Agricultural Economics at the University of Hohenheim in Germany. Ms. Torres, would you like to share your opening statement?
Hi, Pat. Thanks for the introduction and good morning to our dear speakers and audience. So I'm just waiting for Zhao to up the few couple of slides. Yeah, thanks. So I think so far we are in agreement that COVID-19 indeed exposed the vulnerability of our food systems. And because it was spontaneous, it was unprecedented, whatever has already been problems were, all the more emphasized or underscored. So it was in multiple levels and in different aspects. So I think I can point out three aspects in there. So first is in the production, particularly in agriculture. So let me just clarify that actually even before the pandemic happened, we already are having quite a number of concerns in the agriculture sector, particularly in the question of whether we are producing enough. Because as of the period between 2008 and 2018, in that 10-year period, although agriculture is growing at a rate of 1.3%. Population is all the more growing at 1.8%. So there is a slight issue on how agriculture is catching up. And we should note also that the GDP growth rates also includes those that are produced for markets outside of our country. So that growth isn't necessarily translated to what the local markets are able to access, right? So second aspect of COVID-19's disruption is on logistics. So we have experienced during the lockdown, especially in the first few months, that there was a heavy disconnect in coordinating between local governments on the mobilization, not only of food products to our markets, but also on farmers, on smallholders to be able to produce during that time. So that was a heavy time, of course, for every one of us. And third is both of these translated the difficulties in the prices. So the limited supply has driven the prices up, which made it difficult for especially our wage earners, those who are earning on a daily basis. It made them difficult not just to access the right quantity of food, but also the right quality of food. So there's a compromise in that. Next slide, please. So, on the question of it's not anymore whether the question is not anymore whether our food system is sustainable or resilient in this case. So the bigger question, if we define that the definition of sustainability is whether the food system can absorb stress while maintaining basic structure, yes, and overall, the food system has still allowed the Philippines to produce food and translate that and deliver that to the market. And probably for most of us who have, better access to internet connection, and might have better safety nets compared to the people who I mentioned already are earning their wages daily, or who are in the uplands or in the rural areas, that might not be the issue. So the bigger question that we have to ask is, first, is the food supply equitably accessed during an external shock like COVID-19? And the second question is, if it is indeed accessed, was it accessed at reasonable prices? And one way or the other, we have every one of us have felt that either to these questions, the answer is a no. And next slide, please. So the bigger question is, how do we now make our food systems more resilient in the long run? Okay, so my view here is, we have to talk about the long run, right? So the government, of course, has strategies, the DA, as to how to make productions more intensified, especially in the short run, to be able to catch up to the needs of the local market at most. But in the long run, we have to talk about three basic things. First is on the sustainable land use. So we have to talk about farming in the long view, because we are saying that the Philippines is an agricultural country, but we have to also enable our farmers to be able to farm for a long time, if that is something that they get their livelihoods from. And we also should not forget that there are that apart from people in the urban areas, the rural areas, there are also a huge population, which is around 18 million of people in the uplands, who are most of them are also getting their livelihoods from farming in the forested areas, right? So we have to think about agriculture as a total land productivity. It's a whole system. It's not just sustain. So and also we know that the intensification also in the short run will compromise the fertility of the soil, and eventually can contribute to the decrease in productivity in the long run of our small farmers, if we don't adopt better nature-based solutions. And then the second is on diversification. Of course, that's already something that we a strategy that has been adopted by a lot of farmers, since that increases also their resilience to shocks, not only economically but socioculturally as well. And it also contributes a lot to improve nutrition in especially in the uplands. And the third point and last here is the use of technology. So during the pandemic, we might all have experienced that we don't need anymore to go out and go physically to the bank, etc. I mean, the way we do our financial transactions have been shifted to the use of technology, or from our mobile phones. But apart from those that we individually have been able to experience, in the long run, we can also think about how to better link our farmers to our producers to direct markets, that can eventually provide better options, and decrease prices, if some of the middle nodes in the value chain can be connected directly from our farm to the plate. So I think just as a last statement here, we have seen that in 2020 the contraction of agriculture has been the lowest compared to the industry and the services sector, right? So no matter what kind of shock we experience, agriculture will always be on the front line. So yeah, that's it for me. Back to Pat.
Thank you very much, Ms. Torres, for sharing your viewpoints. I do agree that agriculture will always be on the front line. So I hope that food supply moving forward will be equitably accessed by all. Let's go back to Ms. Charina A. Javier, a science research specialist too of the Nutrition Assessment and Monitoring Division of DOST's Food and Nutrition Research Institute. Prior to her current designation, she worked under the Food and Nutrition Creative and Publication Unit of FNRI's Technology Diffusion and Science and Technology Services Division. Ms. Javier graduated from the University of the Philippines with a bachelor's degree of science in community nutrition and a master's in development economics. Ms. Javier, would you like to share your opening statement?
Yes, good morning, Miss Pat. Sorry for the technical problem a while ago. I'd start
It's
by
okay.
saying that even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines has had low farm productivity compared to our neighbor ASEAN countries. Given that our entire country is surrounded by the sea, we are one of the top fish producers, but many of our fishing practices are not sustainable. Next slide. Um, there there has also been a stark difference of rural and urban households, wherein in the rural areas the incidence of poverty is three times among agricultural households compared to that of non-agricultural households. In contrast, in the urban centers there is increasing trend in overweight and obesity because of the easy access of highly processed foods. Next slide. We are also vulnerable to climate change and other geohazards like typhoons, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and drought. So next slide, please. Given those existing conditions, based on the 2019 Expanded National Nutrition Survey, 44.2% or about 4 in every 10 households are moderate to severely food insecure. So this is pre-COVID. 5.1% of them are severely food insecure or have no food at home at all. So next slide, please. There is also triple burden of malnutrition existing even before the pandemic. Undernutrition among young children remains high. Overweight and obesity among adults is increasing, and there are micronutrient deficiencies in different age groups, such as vitamin A deficiency among children, anemia among children and women of reproductive age, and iodine deficiency in the pockets of the population in selected provinces. Next slide, please. So I just want to show the trend in the prevalence of malnutrition. Next slide. Um, Among children under 5 years old, and based on the analysis of the World Bank on the undernutrition in the Philippines, the status has barely changed in the last 3 decades. For example, stunting among this age group has been 3 out of 10 in the last 3 decades. So it has been stagnant. So next slide, please. In contrast, among adults, the prevalence in overweight and obesity in the last 25 years has more than doubled from 16.6% to 36.6%. Next slide, please. Now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, strict travel restrictions, regulation of indoor dining, suspension of face-to-face work and classes were imposed, which have greatly affected the availability, accessibility, and even utilization of our food. Next slide, please. Based on the latest labor force survey of the PSA, our unemployment rate is 7.7% and underemployment is 14.2%. Next slide, please. The FNRI did a study in 2020, 8 months after the declaration of the pandemic, among households surveyed in 2019, and compared their status in 2020. This was already mentioned by Ms. Pat in the introduction, but I'd like to focus here is um, those in the low risk areas have higher increase in food insecurity experience compared to those in the high risk areas. And this is because they receive lesser food and cash assistance and lesser job opportunities compared to those in the highly urbanized centers. Next slide. So now I'd like to discuss the challenges in the food system in terms of availability, accessibility, and utilization, which are also windows for us to accelerate our progress in food security. First, in terms of availability, next slide, that is production and distribution of food. There has been more favor in cash crops in our agricultural policies that has reduced the focus of diversifying food and livelihood opportunities. So this has been um, discussed by Ms. Ain a while ago. Based on the study, in 2020 by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, they saw that our rice requirement is met, but we have oversupply of our protein sources such as meat and fish products, while vegetables and fruits are not enough considering both local produce and imports. So there is a need for us to diversify food that is available in terms of production and distribution. We have to support small and medium enterprises to develop added value products from our agricultural produce and use technology to connect our food producers and consumers. Next is on accessibility. So next slide, please. Both physical, such as limited transportation, and economic access. But the more serious concern is economic access. And in fact, it is the major reason for the food insecurity experience of the households wherein they have no means to purchase food. So either they lost job or their available income is not enough to buy their needs. Next slide, please. So last is on food utilization. Again, even before the pandemic, majority of our households do not meet the recommended energy and nutrient intakes. And even if we have available foods when the households have no access or means to buy food, then the intake is still not met. Of course, there is also some intra-household distribution issues, and we see that in their nutritional status, wherein within the same households, there is double burden of malnutrition. We also need to reduce our food wastage. Next slide, please. Both in the production and household level. In the production side, this is where food innovations must come in to prolong shelf life. We need to prepare only what we need, what we can consume, and have proper storage to avoid spoilage. So I'd like to end with the message number one of the nutritional guidelines for Filipinos, which is eating a variety of foods every day. Uh, and I think it should also be our guide from the production to consumption. So from farm to table. Thank you. Back to you, Miss Pat.
Thank you very much, Miss Javier. All the stats you mentioned made me realize that nutrition is such a multifaceted issue that's strongly linked to a person's economic capacity. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your opening statements. And now let's proceed to the panel discussion. I'd like to kickstart this conversation with Ms. Javier because you're from the FNRI. I'd like to ask you to share your thoughts about the current landscape of food security in the Philippines. I mean, this pandemic has affected everyone and everything, but generally speaking, food security wise, are we better off now than, let's say, a decade ago?
Um, I'd like to start by saying that I'd like to cite rather the um, state of the state of food and nutrition security published by FAO, which says that that even before the pandemic, we are not meeting our target to zero
Mhm,
hunger by 2030.
mhm,
And in the Philippines, in the last, I think, before the pandemic, we have been
mhm,
there has been a decrease in our food
mhm,
insecurity. However, with the pandemic, a lot of people, a lot of household heads have lost their jobs. So we
yeah,
are expecting that the trend in food insecurity will increase, and until such time that we have recovered from this crisis, we are expecting that food insecurity might increase.
all
Thank you,
right.
Miss Pat.
Thank you for that, Ms. Javier. From what you said, it sounds like the economy is the topmost issue that has to be addressed first for us to further our progress towards food security. Is that it?
Um, yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is that a lot of one of the major reasons why households are experiencing food insecurity is because they don't have
Mhm.
access food. So they've lost livelihoods, they've lost their jobs. So if we can um, fast track our recovery, then if we can produce more job, if there are more job creation for our households, and on top of that, we are assisting them. For example, if they have not enough food, so kahit dagdagan natin kung ano man yung meron sila, then mas magiging maganda yung food security uh, situation ng mga households natin.
Thank you for that, Ms. Javier. Let's talk more about economy and finance in the next few minutes. You know, I attended a webinar by the National Academy of Science and Technology earlier this year, and it was mentioned there that our food system has three steps: food production, food distribution, and food consumption. It was also mentioned there in the webinar that we need to have a fourth step, which is waste management. Do you think that waste management will make our food system crisis proof, Miss Duran?
Thank you, Pat. And waste management, I suppose this also links, or we can link this to what Charina has been mentioning a while ago in terms of food loss and waste. Because
Yes.
with the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, actually, we saw that one of the things that constrains the sustainability of the food systems is actually the incidence of food loss and waste. So you may have recalled some reports of oversupply in certain
Mm,
areas, and because of the movements and restrictions, especially during the height of the ECQ, it resulted to spoilage, or it
yeah.
resulted to not reaching areas that needed it the most. But I mean, principally, for us to be able to address this, we need data. We need to establish the baseline information, where we are now, what is the status, where is it that the gap is the
Mm,
biggest, who needs our help the most. So I think that is the first step that we need to address. I noticed that Cha presented some statistics a while ago on food loss and waste, but
mm,
we really need more granular data, more localized data, especially with the
oh,
Mandanas ruling. Much of these responsibilities now move to the local governments. And on waste management, we know that there is Republic Act 9003, which necessitates barangays, local governments to adopt and practice composting. But when FAO was doing we call it the issue paper, that we prepared for the Food Systems Pre-Summit in the Philippines, but it actually intended to identify the priority needs of the country in terms of transitioning towards sustainable food systems. And we found out that in terms of the compliance to RA 9003,
mm,
compliance is actually low because we lack local level composting facilities. So in terms of waste management, biodegradable waste management, for instance, we really need to invest more on these kinds of interventions. And having these, for instance, addressing food loss and waste, being able to better manage our waste. First, we create the consciousness among the people of what we need to do to be able to make our food systems more resilient and more capable of responding to shocks such as the recent or the ongoing pandemic. But offhand, in terms of this fourth step that was
yeah.
mentioned, these are some of the facts that we would like to flag.
All right. What I'm hearing is that there has to be a commitment from LGUs in order for us to incorporate this fourth step in the food system.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's right.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Can I come in, Pat? Just a little to add to Charina and to Tom's point.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah. Very quickly. When we conducted the survey, when we had a chance to conduct the survey on hunger, what we found out was that never mind the numbers now, because I'm sure the numbers would be higher in terms of incidence of people
Mm,
going hungry. But the main reason for people going hungry is not because of availability of food, but it's the affordability of food. They did not have money to buy food. 85% of those who went hungry said that they went hungry because they had nothing to buy. And let's say, this conflict between livelihood and safety, becomes a major issue during this time because precisely you need to capacitate people to buy their needs, including food.
Correct.
And then also in that same survey, that we did on we found out that in terms of wastage, if people reduce their wastage or eliminated their wastage, rice in particular, you will need to import 400,000 metric tons less. Can you imagine the kind of imports that we are doing just because of wastage? Rice in particular. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that we were wasting that much rice. So I really hope that all the LGUs come together to commit to this fourth step. Okay, so I'd like to talk about that more later, but in the meantime, I want to move on to a unintentional farming method because Ms. Torres mentioned in her presentation earlier that production is having a hard time keeping up with the needs of the population. An intentional farming method that's supposed to combine economic and environmental benefits is agroforestry. And as a member of agroforestry, Ms. Torres, could you please share with us how this method reverses deforestation whilst generating economic benefits for our farmers?
Hi, thanks, Pat. Yeah. So if the word agroforestry seems a bit technical, maybe the
Yeah.
basic definition that we can get is it's basically the deliberate integration of trees on farms. So basically, you have a farmland, and then you either integrate trees on your crops, or you put it as borders, for protection and other purposes. So what kind of trees can you actually integrate? So in basically agroforestry is a land use management technique. So it's a wide range, and we can go on about all day talking about that. But the basic info here is that what kind of trees can you actually integrate? So one, that's timber, where you can get harvest logs, etc. Two is fruit, where you can get for edible and consumption or for selling. And three is other, like I know that by definition bamboo can be a little confusing, but in riparian or river systems, bamboo is considered as part of an
Actually.
agroforestry system. And then so basically when you're talking about benefits, that can be two more, can be more, but the basic twofold benefits would be one, the economic. So as I've already mentioned, you can harvest something other than what you already have on your farm. So for example, you're harvesting bananas, and most of our monocultured farms are very, very prone to diseases or pathogens na isang sweep lang ng sakit, ubos yung kabuhayan ng magsasaka natin, especially of our smallholders. So it's very important to make them more resilient. And another is yung augmented income can indirectly naman allow them to access more nutritious food. So if they don't, consume the edible fruits from the trees, they can, sell the fruits and buy more nutritious foods of their choice or whatever is recommended, for example, by the FNRI. And the more important or equally important thing is the environmental benefit of this technique. Kasi as I was already saying earlier, we have 18 million or maybe more in 2021 people in the uplands. Kasi if napansin nyo, you may have actually friends na when the pandemic strike dito sa Metro Manila, they chose to go to rural areas where it's more relaxed, etc. And the same way that there are actually a lot who are migrating to the uplands because wala nang income dito sa lowlands. The easiest resource is what you can harvest and farm on your own in the uplands. So that causes that very huge problem of degradation. We're not saying na a lot of it is man-made, but some of it are already is also nature induced na. So if you integrate trees on farms, especially in the uplands, there already have been studies na nagpo-prove that there's improvement of groundwater storage, and because nade-decrease yung runoff. Like if it rains, yung, for example, no matter how good the rice-based systems in the lowlands are, if you don't protect the uplands, of course it will get affected. So that's what I'm saying about total land productivity, or yung ano natin, total system approach that we should look at in the long run. There's also evidence on better carbon storage, improvement of microclimate, at saka yung, of course, if the fertility from the trees, as the foliage of the leaves, for example, also contributes to better fertility of the soil in the long run. So yeah.
Right. Thank you for that, Ms. Torres. By the way, I'd like to ask, what are the prerequisites of agroforestry? You mentioned upland communities at least twice. Is it only for upland communities?
No, actually, it's mostly practiced in the uplands, but because of the proven benefits, also we have also cases in Eastern Visayas where it's already integrated, also in the lowlands with other crops.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. I'd like to dwell a bit more on the latest innovations. Mr. Reside mentioned agri-tech briefly in his opening remarks, and I think it's very important nowadays because it's disrupted all industries, the food industry included. For Mr. Reside, could you please share with us how is technology specifically helping address food security, especially when it
Yeah,
comes to the
okay.
Asian staple, rice?
Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Yeah. No, because as I've said earlier, increasing population, all the challenges that Charina and Tam and Ayn has mentioned regarding production, distribution, and consumption of food, rice in particular. Now, all these challenges, including climate change, including the pandemic. Typhoon Maring has just left us with a wave of destruction to life and to property and also to agriculture. So we really need to increase productivity and to make our rice production as resilient as possible, climate proof as it were. And so I'd like to share a few things regarding the role of technology. No? We have a very strong partnership with Phil Rice of DA, and we have developed a few things together as part of our mandates. To begin with, yung rice varieties mismo, rice varieties that are developed for more tolerant to flood, to drought, to salinity, and in general to give you as much yield as possible. But you might have the best rice varieties, but if you don't give it the proper nutrients, if you don't protect it from pests and diseases, wala din. No? So it's very important that you, together with the rice varieties, you develop also methodologies for a better management of crop, nutrient, and pest management. And ERI, together with Phil Rice and DA, has developed certain using the digital formats, digital advisory to farmers regarding these matters of crop, nutrient, and pest management. We are also using satellite-based information to give you information on the current situation in terms of area, yield, and possible interventions that have to be undertaken by government in order to protect the crop. And this is not really a project. It's already a technology that we have developed together with Phil Rice. It's being implemented by Phil Rice, and the results are being used by DA. We have used. I don't know if you're familiar with drone technology in agriculture. We have demonstrated how this is done, not only in overseeing the crop situation, but also in delivering fertilizer, pesticide application, and direct seeding in the farms, which is which is good for labor and also for efficiency. And we hope that DA soon will catch to this technology and distribute suitable drones to the field. Nabanggit na kanina, yung how we make use of wastage. Rice straw management is something that we have developed also, and which can be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from burning straw in open fields. So it's something that we pay attention to, how to make use of the rice straw in a more productive way instead of just emitting greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, we're devoting a lot of our effort in the management of irrigation water because we have, like I said earlier, we have to produce more with less. And irrigation water is very expensive. So we are using a laser land leveling and water level management in this particular area. So those are just some examples, part of the some of the technologies that we are using. But again, we have developed these technologies but we have to translate them to farmers' practices in the field so that they become effective.
Oh, we lost Mr. Reside. Okay. So, so maybe I can address the next question to the rest of the panel first. Mr. Reside was talking about agri-tech. My question is agri-tech more useful for certain types of crops? Like, for instance, is it more useful for corn farmers than for banana farmers?
I can start, Pat, if that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah,
From
yes, please.
my end and based on our experience, agri-tech is definitely something that can be applied to all of the sectors in agriculture. But of course, it would depend on the kind of technology that you're introducing because there might be some that are only applicable for certain commodities or certain contexts,
Yeah.
certain localities. But technology is definitely something that the agriculture sector can benefit from, and it can help improve the efficiencies within the value chain. It can improve even the competitiveness of our local farmers. So it's just a matter of making or it's just a matter of developing certain tools that are applicable for different types of commodities, different types of locations in the countries, and making sure that there's accompanying extension support to make sure that the technology will be understandable, especially to the people on the ground who will be using them.
All right. Thank you for that, Ms. Duran. So Mr. Reside, I think, is back. Mr. Reside, thank you for sharing all those latest technological developments that ERI is doing with Phil Rice. I'd like to talk more about golden rice, which you mentioned earlier. What is golden rice? Is it golden hued, and is it because it's being marketed right now? So is it like the best rice variety that your partnership has developed?
Well, best is of course relative, no, depending on what you want to see. Golden here refers to the color. It's really
Okay.
gold. It's really yellow. It's not golden in terms of profitability and so on. But it's because it's beta carotene rich rice
Ah,
that delivers the whatever prevents blindness among malnourished children. So this is the advantage. So you are actually eating something which not only nourishes your need for carbohydrates, but also gives you the proper vitamins and minerals and vitamins and nutrients to make you healthy. In this particular case, beta carotene to prevent blindness. Yeah.
right. Thank you very much for sharing more about that golden rice. I hope that it finds its way to a lot of grocery shelves soon. By the
Yeah.
way,
What
both Mr.
we first have to produce it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's still okay. Okay, so it's still being
Yeah.
developed. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Both Miss Torres and Mr. Reside mentioned pests basically and pest management. I wonder, is there any local program right now that is breeding pest resistant or climate change resistant fruits and vegetables?
Who would Tam? Do you
Um,
have some idea on that?
I believe Erie Sir Romy is developing these types of varieties, if I'm not mistaken, and all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
for the
But
side of
yeah.
y- yes,
Rice.
for the
Rice.
side
For
of
rice in particular.
FAOY,
Yeah.
Yes. Well, from our end, just very quickly, we're not developing any variety at this time, but we are actually supporting the government, the Department of Agriculture, in implementing some practices that would help manage pests. So, for instance, we have an ongoing collaboration with the Department of Agriculture on managing fall armyworm. So
Mm.
these are some of the interventions that FAO has. But in terms of developing varieties, I don't know if Sir Romy would like to share
Yeah,
more
yeah.
on that.
Well, this is one area of in varietal improvement. Of course, you have drone resistance, salinity resistance, and pest resistance is one of them. But you can only do so much right now in terms of technology to incorporate pest resistance in the variety itself. You still have to manage actual pests in the farm, and also that is part of part of the aspect of crop management that we look at, and we are translating the incidence and occurrence of pests in advisory to farmers. So we do, like I said earlier, we use digital technology to advise farmers on what is attacking them
Mm.
and how to control them. So
Mm.
that is important. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. So, talking about scale, so far we've been talking about food security and sustainability from a broad perspective. But can these concerns be can addressing these concerns be as simple as nurturing vegetable gardens in individual homes? Miss Torres?
Sorry. Sorry. My
It's okay. It's
internet
okay.
lagged a bit.
It's no problem. I was talking about scale because so far we've been talking about food security from a broad perspective. But I was wondering if addressing this problem can also be as basic as nurturing vegetable gardens in individual homes.
Ah, all right. Got it. Yeah, that's actually a very good question, Pat. So, as I mentioned, diba, we've been talking about, national level or regional level, but the question is always like what I can do from my end, like, right,
Mm.
especially for those who are already food insecure. So, the answer to your question for me is probably yes, right? So whether that's integrated with trees or not, as long as it's diversified. But the bigger question is, but the bigger condition is if you actually do have your own space to plant, a nutrition-rich, diversified range of species. As we know, the poorest are actually here in the urban settlements where it's cramped up in terms of space. So I think that's where a lot of public and private initiated efforts are very very much appreciated, and we should always be looking at how to scale them. So one example is just during the pandemic, there's this non-government organization who started this community gardening. There are, if you notice, if you drive around the metro, that there are lands na parang wala namang gumagamit, it's nakatiwangwang ganyan. So this NGO approached the owner and asked them na, can we plant vegetables like that? And then the beneficiaries are actually, and the farmers also are the people in Payatas, somewhere in QC.
Mm.
So that's one. Second is, I think we should always highlight the role of the local government in these
Mhm.
efforts, because especially in the pandemic, we have seen how much the power of the local government can do in terms of
Mhm.
recovery response, and also yung immediate nating response nga doon sa pandemya. So the local governments have also initiated like this community gardening, in order to aggregate people and start these community gardens. So yeah, indeed, that's one way, and we also have to we have to recognize that it can be done in a smaller scale. As much as we should look at it, in order to try to level that up para
Mhm.
more people can benefit.
Yeah, I hope that I hope that the movement becomes more widespread. Miss
Yeah.
Javier, Miss Javier, would you like to share more your thoughts about vegetable gardens in the city? What do you think are like the easiest vegetables to grow in the city?
Yeah. Thank you, Miss Pat. Actually, I live in a condo, but I do have potted vegetables in my very small balcony. So it is
Mhm.
possible to plant in urban areas kahit maliit lang yung space, no? Parang 1 by 2 meters lang yung
Mhm.
balcony ko. So I have grafted calamansi even in a condo setting. So pwede
Nice.
yun. Pechay, mustasa. They are easy to plant and madali silang i-harvest. You'll be surprised, I have ampalaya, pero ano lang yun, talbos lang yung kinukuha ko. So, hindi naman siya umaabot sa namumunga na siya. So, there are other households in the urban areas with bigger space. So, meron silang mga kamatis, talong. So yung mga ito, these are possible to produce even in urban settings. So in fact, yung may mga LGUs, not here in NCR, but in other LGUs, kasama sa ayuda nila yung merong seedlings. So seeds are seedlings. So sana ganun din yung ibang households natin. When kung magbibigay ng ayuda, sana meron din kasama na merong pang short term, which is yung immediate, may bigas, may mga delata, and yung iba merong mga fresh produce dun sa ayuda. Pero sana meron din kasama. We'd like to encourage din other households um, to produce their own food kahit pa nasa
Mhm.
urban settings nila. So, pwede yan gawin kahit sa mga cans lang. Ako sa mga plastic bottles na dapat itatapon na. So, binubutasan ko lang yung baba. So, yun yung pinagtatamnan ko. So, it is possible.
Thank you for that, Miss Javier. We also have calamansi at home and malunggay additionally. Yes.
Yeah.
So this, yes.
I can I add something about technology? Kasi this is on the part naman of small and medium enterprises. And this is to enhance then their products, food products. So for example, FNRI, they assist small and medium enterprises to not only add value to their products, but also add nutrition to their products. For example,
Mhm.
noodles, breads. So may mga added na ginagamit yung mga agricultural products natin. So we have squash noodles, squash pandesal, squash buns, nutri buns. So in fact, on Friday we'll be launching another variant of our nutri bun. So um, maraming pwedeng the small and medium enterprises can actually reach uh, reach out sa mga DOST offices or FNRI directly to assist for assistance rather for assistance in their food product development. So pwede siyang gawin. And this is
All right.
also ayan, so food innovation. Kailangan natin 'yan para din ma-reduce yung food wastage on the production side and also make more nutritious food available on the consumer side. So yan. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I hope that more food manufacturers partner with FNRI for that initiatives. So, by the way,
Yeah.
we are already out of time. So, we only have enough time for closing remarks. I wasn't able to ask my question about finance because finance impacts how much food producers produce. Anyway, maybe any of you can incorporate your thoughts about that in your closing remarks. Thank you very much for all these wonderful answers, by the way. Maybe we can start our closing remarks with Miss Torres and then Miss Javier, Miss Duran, and then Mr. Reside.
Thanks, Pat. So thanks everyone for a very nice discussion. And from my end, I think what we have seen is that the issue of food system resilience is very much multifaceted, as what Ms. Duran and Mr. Reside has already mentioned. So and the solutions can be made, not just at the small scale, but also at the larger scale. And I think one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is I'm just hoping that our work is also not limited to, the information that we talk about here is not just limited in discussions, but is translated to actual solutions in the ground, as what Charina has also mentioned. Because as much as a lot of the problems, economic, environmental, etc., is a bigger chunk of it can be solved at the policy or public sector level, there are also, and we encourage a lot of private sector movement also, because that's most of the innovations start also on what we experience as civilians, as citizens, and what we can do from our part and how to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Miss Torres. Miss Javier?
Yes, thank you, Miss Pat. I would just like to reiterate again my message a while ago that on the nutritional guidelines for Filipinos, and that is eating a variety of foods every day. So I hope it will also be our guiding principle from producing our food to produce more diverse food, and to eating and educating our consumers to um, eat a variety of foods every day to have a nutritious foods in their table. So that's it. Thank you, Miss Pat.
Thank you, Miss Javier. Miss Duran?
Thank you. So I guess my key takeaways from our discussion this morning is that in promoting resilient food systems, among the key drivers are innovations and partnerships, and of course, making sure that there's collective action among us. So in terms of innovations, I'd like to maybe stress that it's not just about using technologies, but also developing new kinds of approaches, more worthwhile approaches or methodologies, and making sure that they reach and are understood by the actual people who will be using them. So this may include promoting biodiversity for food security and nutrition, and new ways of resilient livelihoods for communities with different contexts. And to be more resilient and sustainable, I'd like to also emphasize that evidence and sufficient information are definitely very crucial to this process, because it will help inform investments. It will help inform the decision makers, the policy makers, where the scarce public resources should be allocated, and at the same time, it can help inform the different partners, the different actors, on what are the gaps and where their contribution is most needed, or more impact can be generated from. So we also recognize, or I also recognize that paradigm shift and the critical change of mindset in looking at establishing and maintaining strong partnerships between the public and the private sectors, and the way that we work and support each other are definitely very much important. So in ensuring that the country can anticipate and withstand risks and future threats to food security, similar to what we're experiencing now in this pandemic, um, planning and preparing in advance, having mitigation measures at hand, and making sure that everyone knows what to do, is very much essential to preventing recurrences of food supply disruptions that we're experiencing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Duran. Mr. Reside?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Yeah, before I finally close, let me just share that very quickly that like you and Charina, plantitas, we are fans of urban agriculture. But I like urban agriculture, but urban agriculture does not like me. So I'm not very successful. So, but that brings me to the point of, why is it that I am not successful? It has something to do with technology and scaling. Maybe I don't know the technologies. Maybe nobody is training me. Nobody is giving me access to the right technology. So these are the things that we need to consider when we talk of the broader scale. What is the environment that I work with? Do I get free materials? Is there a policy that or operational program among the government agencies to actually go out of their way to help in this particular context? The answer is yes, maybe for many people, but not for me, not yet. Okay, but anyway, in closing, with all the problems that Charina and Tam and Ain has shared with us, the myriad of problems facing our food systems, no one not one stakeholder acting in isolation can deliver a one-size-fits-all solution. So that means, as Tama said, increased collaboration, intensified cooperation, and collective action will be needed to create sustainable resilience and deliver impactful transformation of our food systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reside. And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists again for sharing their valuable insights today with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Reside, Ms. Duran, Ms. Javier, and Ms. Torres. Much
Yeah.
gratitude to our partner organizations, the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Management Association of the Philippines, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as to our media partner, the Philippine STAR. Much gratitude too to the SM Foundation for making this series possible. Also, to everyone who tuned in today, thank you. Be sure to check Business World's social media pages to be updated on our next projects. Again, this is Patricia Mirasol, and this has been Business World Insights. Stay well and good afternoon.